Governor Mike Huckabee. You like Hendrix? You requested
I love
that.
Jimi Hendrix. Yes, I do. And one of the interesting things, one of the first times I did the interview on a rock radio station in Little Rock, they played Hendrix bumper music going into it. And I knew every song they were, and they were shocked. They just knew that I was this straight-laced, the kind of guy that had swallowed a curtain rod. My back was so straight and baptized in vinegar and very unhappy. And I said, no, I know all the songs. And I went through this whole deal. But I'm a big Hendrix fan. And obviously, when you come to Seattle, it's kind of got to, pay tribute somewhere.
Hey, Eric, go ahead and follow up. Repeat your question again for Mike Huckabee.
Absolutely. Governor, you've traveled to 41 countries, and we've traveled to several ourselves. What do you say to Americans to give them some sort of perspective on how easy we have it in relation to the rest of the world?
The poorest person in America lives better than about 90% of the world's population. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't care and have a lot of compassion for people who are poor in this country, because relatively speaking, poverty is poverty, doesn't matter where it is. But this is an amazing place. I'll give you a little story. I was in a car the other day that Meet the Press had sent to pick me up to do the interview. And so the driver and I were talking. He's been in America 7 years. He came here from Africa. And he came here, didn't know a word of English. He washed dishes and worked in the kitchen at McDonald's and then worked his way up, and one thing led to another. Now he owns his own business. And in 7 years, he's gone from not knowing a word to speaking very fluent. And he was asking me all these questions about English words. And he was saying, in this country, a person can do anything if you're willing to work hard. And it's just so refreshing to hear somebody who loved America more than most of us who were born here. And he lived the dream that so many people forget is still possible. I tell people I'm living the American dream, and I have lived it. I know where I've come from. And I understand, if you grow up where you live in a little bitty town in the Deep South and, you don't think you'll ever see anything but 3 blocks away from you. And one day to run for president of the United States, what a country.
Now, myths about Republicans include...
Okay.
Don't care about the poor.
Oh, they don't. No, I'm kidding. I mean,
love big business in the pocket.
Soundbite just
love
happened.
big business and
soundbite.
Oh, that'll be on YouTube. I can see that one now. No, I think there's a lot of myths. For example, that we don't care about the poor, and I'm sure there's some Republicans who don't. But the reality is, the Democrats have more money this year than the Republicans do, and there are an incredible amount of extraordinarily filthy rich Democrats. I don't think politics is about income levels.
Let's see. Casey's got one for you.
Okay.
I don't think it's a myth, though.
Oh, what is this one?
Oh, okay, this is a good one.
Oh, okay.
This is a good one.
All right.
So, my dream is about to become fulfilled. I'm going to be marrying my life partner. Now, I was wondering if that poses a problem, though, because I find you a really funny guy, and I like you a lot. But if I were to tell you I was marrying my life partner, I feel like maybe you wouldn't like me so much.
I respect people who have different views. I believe marriage is traditional. I'm a traditionalist. And, just like I'm probably not going to change your mind, you probably won't change mine. Doesn't mean that I don't like people, doesn't mean that I hate people, or doesn't mean that I don't respect people. I think people can have disagreements and have a very different approach and attitude toward other folks without having any sort of animosity toward them. But I do believe marriage is traditional. In every culture in the history of mankind, marriage has always meant man-woman relationship who create the next generation and then train their replacements. And I think when we change the rules, that's a serious thing. It's one thing to say people have a right to live with whoever they want. That's one thing. But when you redefine an institution, that's a different deal. And that's what really I think is happening in our culture. And I'm not comfortable with that, because I think that it's a big, big issue when you redefine.
Are you comfortable with equal rights for partnerships, where in terms of being treated as a couple, as with civil unions?
Well, yeah, I think people can have the capacity, and they do that through a power of attorney. There are a lot of different ways in which those things can be accomplished. But anything that approaches where you start really encroaching upon the marital relationship, I think that requires...
I just want cake, man. That's all I want is cake.
Well, by the way, I should also tell you that Casey is as straight as that curtain rod which you didn't swallow. So she just wanted to ask you that question.
Oh, okay.
See how you looked at it.
There's a member of my family that I feel I love and very close to, and they can't get married, so I'm speaking on her behalf.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Law just changed in California.
Yeah.
There's the argument is that doesn't really hurt marriage because marriage is already difficult for people to get to do.
That's exactly the point. We've got a 50% failure rate with traditional marriage. It looks like we ought to be getting that one right before we start a new version of it.
Well, gays stay together forever. I think would help our average.
Well, they really don't. Actually, they don't. The truth is they have a greater breakup rate.
Is it true?
Yeah, that is true.
Well, if you count bathrooms.
Oh, I'm not going there. I may want to run for office again someday. I don't want it all to end in Seattle.
Did you count restrooms? I'm just curious. Now, a couple of other things. Now, other Republican myths? Anybody got one? Joe, you must have one.
Well, it's not so much a myth, but I want to say, Mike, I like you, I was born in Water Valley, Mississippi, a very small town. I had not dirt on the floor. We had floorboards, but my dad had dirt on the floor. Mm-hmm. My grandfather was a Democrat, and I've always voted Democrat. But when it got down to 4 people this year, you and Mr. McCain and Miss Clinton and Mr. Obama, I said any of these 4 people would make a great leader, and I was really torn as to which one to choose. I decided to campaign for Hillary Clinton, which I've done quite a bit of. Now that it looks like she may not get the nomination, I'm really torn. As a lifelong Democrat, what drew you to the Republican Party, and what would you say to a person who might consider voting Republican for the first time? Because I must say, we've spoken to your wife, Janet. We've spoken to Cindy McCain. You guys have made yourselves very available to us, whereas not so much with the other party.
There you go. That's it right there.
Obama is too busy walking around with outstretched arms, blessing things and feeding people with loaves and fishes.
Hillary's collecting her 30
You're not going to touch that one either.
No, I'm not going to touch that one. In fact, you're doing a lot of stuff today. I'm not touching this stuff. I grew up like most kids in the Deep South in a hardcore Democrat family. There were 3 great heroes in every household in the Deep South. Elvis, Jesus, and FDR, not necessarily in that order.
Yeah, well done.
And the truth is, it was a tough thing for me to become a Republican, which I did as a teenager, but here was the reason. Because I really believe, first of all, in individual empowerment. I did not believe that I should be held back in my life, that I had to sort of be categorized as part of a group, that it was my demographic that either led me forward or kept me back. So the idea of individual empowerment, individual responsibility was part of it. I also believe that the best government is the most local government, not a centralized federal government, that we ought to do things more locally, less federally. I believe in lower taxes, not higher taxes, to the degree that can be accomplished, because if you go out and earn money, you ought to spend it, not somebody reaching into your pocket and then spending it for you. I believe also that the less regulation we have, the more free market we have, the better the economy works. When you manipulate the marketplace with a lot of government interference, what you end up doing is you empower the people who are doing the regulating as opposed to empower the consumers who really ought to be managing that marketplace. There are a lot of other reasons. One of them is I'm pro-life. I believe very strongly that the Founding Fathers, when they said that all of us are created equal, if you think about the implication of that, it means that everybody has intrinsic worth. It doesn't matter whether you have Down syndrome. It doesn't matter whether you are severely disabled, whether you're in the womb or whether you're in a bed and you're terminally ill. We ought to respect you as a human being and respect your life. And because of that deep embrace that I have for the sanctity of every human life, its intrinsic worth and value, it kind of left me without many choices in terms of a political home.
Yet you rock out to Jimi Hendrix.
Absolutely.
With all those beliefs.
Some of the
that's the
people,
myth about Republicans, I guess, is that you are humorless and no fun. I mean, yet you seem kind of fun.
You're proving us wrong.
That really hurts.
Well, no, I mean, that's, wow. I said the myth.
No, here's the thing I find. And again, this is a generalization, not always true. There's some funny liberals, but I find that liberals are the most sensitive people on earth. Everything offends them. Everything requires you to apologize all over your face for. Look, life is too short for us to get just too politically correct where we're getting all this sensitivity. We ought to lighten up, make fun of ourselves, and live life with a little bit of levity. And that's something I think that folks on the far left sometimes miss.